Oh, I don't believe that. Patty, we can't speak, can we?
Today?
Yeah,
Probably not.
no, I didn't say so.
Are you here for the one,
The one.
yes, no,
Okay,
it's,
sorry.
it's on the agenda, so.
Yeah, no, I know, my.
No, you may not today.
Well, it's really hard for me not to speak.
You could
Very
always,
say PhD.
you can always send an email, you know that.
Oh, I sent one today.
Okay. Oh, I don't know.
We're gonna talk about the weather.
Yeah, you could, the weather. Yes, it's gonna be 70 tomorrow, then it's gonna be 40 on Thursday.
74.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, wow, Mizar will still be open making ski.
yeah. Oh, yeah, no, they would. Over 100 inches at Bachelor and 80 something at Hoodoo. No. I try and ride my horse.
So I mean.
Yeah,
Yes, you're right.
So.
I have Cordovers.
Okay.
I actually rode yesterday, and my cat rode again with me. I have two long-haired barn cats, and the one, his brother has ridden with me for years. But this cat just started riding with me.
On your horse?
Yeah, he gets on with me.
Oh.
Anyway.
I used to ride a Morgan and it was like getting on that horse, that's hard.
Well,
I was a kid.
I have a mountain block, and he actually has gone over to the mountain block, and I go, no, Simone, you have to go to the fence. And then I ride up next to the fence, and he comes over and crawls up.
Oh.
Isn't that cool? He's a very, they're great cats. They're great.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I was just saying to Michelle this morning, if I had to have one pet, I love dogs, but it's still.
Might be a possibility that that's.
Yes, well, I have all of the above. I just don't have any bunnies.
Really, it's.
So used to having two.
Yes, I know.
Gotcha.
There. It's kind of work.
So,
That's
turn
right.
my volume
It's-
off.
it's at first.
Usually
So when
shares
you're ready,
Yep.
Oh, you can test it now if you want to. And then you pick whichever one it is, so whichever.
Well, thanks, Isabella, for coming in today.
Yes.
Is this like a fun April 1st day or what?
I know. I know.
My phone walked out on the weekend. And it is my lunch. I changed the password. Friday, or Thursday, like I was supposed to, right? I think it's, anyway, yeah. Anyway, actually, thank you guys for coming.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, okay. Probably, did they, I don't think they have council. I'll go back.
Oh, yeah, I know, banks are really.
Sure, you're right, yeah. it does say
Yeah,
six.
you have to make sure they're cut right.
They said does.
You want to be able to see through them.
You have to be able to see through, but then you can get a short.
That's-
And then
Whatever's on your screen.
Yeah, I know, that's exactly.
Yeah. Well, that might be, yes.
Yeah, some of these other things.
Yeah.
Make sure my mind.
Good, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Not relying on that.
Yeah.
Everybody remember
What are we supposed to remember?
how beautifully it worked last week?
Did we have a meeting here last week?
I don't know why you're not coming on.
Oh, that's right, we did. Oh, how could I forget?
whatever they are, electric or wind power or hydro, they put the power on the system. It goes on high voltage lines. It will hit transformer substations. That'll reduce it down to distribution voltages, which are the voltages that come into your home. So it's usually running at 500 kV, which is what this line is, and it gets transformed down to into your house where it's 120 volt. Next slide. For this line, this would be a typical structure type. It's going to be the big lattice towers. They can be anywhere up to 180 feet tall. The right-of-way width for these lines generally is 250 feet, which means that nothing can be built, no structures can be raised within 125 feet of the center line. That's typical. There are adjustments made from there, but that's pretty typical. Next. We've already gotten some questions. I mean, in general, our routing study is looking to optimize the things that are already out there on the landscape. We'll parallel lines wherever we can. We have a lot of directives from federal agencies and state agencies to kind of co-locate lines. We're trying to parallel existing roads. So everything we're doing is in order to attempt to reduce the overall impacts of the placement of this line. And that's what we're doing as part of our routing study work. Next slide. These are the areas that we're taking a look at during our routing study: land ownership, scenic views, floodplains, cultural impacts, environmental factors such as endangered plants and animals, engineering factors such as constructability, river crossings, things like that. All of these are taken into account when we do a routing study. This shows where we are in the project. Currently, we are really at its inception. We are just beginning the routing studies, and we're trying to get out in front of the communities and let them know, because it's going to be a big line. It's going to have a significant consideration by the communities as a whole. So as part of our effort for our routing studies, we're doing a lot of public outreach, or there will be public outreach planned. We're trying to include working groups so that we can get public involvement in the routing studies themselves. The desire at the end is to have a route that people are acceptable. I mean, generally, no one wants these lines. They're not, people recognize they're needed, but they're, not the most attractive things in the world. So we're trying to get as much input as we can during these routing studies, and we will in the future in order to help get more buy-in on our locations. Next slide. These are our
Question is the CWG Community Working Group. I just see the acronym on
Yes.
that. Yeah. So that'll be people that are interested in the subject kind of brought in.
Yeah, we are reaching out to various community members, facilities, that are not facilities, but different groups, environmental and ecological organizations, trying to get them to be members of the routing study group for review. Because if we can get their buy-in in the beginning, we're more likely to be able to cite a route that's palatable to.
And this is your opportunity today, coming to counties and saying, okay, this is what we're thinking. So let's get some folks at the table.
Yeah, well, just to let you know, because when we start doing outreach, people are probably going to reach out to you and say, hey, do you guys know this is coming? I'm for it, I'm opposed. So we wanted to make sure you're made aware of before we start reaching out to the public. These are our evaluation factors. They're pretty much the same for any line. Doesn't matter the voltage or the length. We're looking for public input, environmental requirements, engineering, capability of construction, economics, and regulatory compliance. Again, these are all things that have to be considered. These are our public outreach and engagement tools. Fact sheets that go out, frequently asked questions will be on websites or sent out in mailers. Briefings, meetings with the community working groups, public hearings, mailings to potentially impacted parties when the line routes are more refined, and even call-in lines. Next slide. These are the high-level permits that are likely to be required. FSEC, of course, is going to be required for the state. We're likely to impact federal lands, so we'll need some level of NEPA analysis. At some point, we'll have to go to the PUC and get a certification of public necessity. And there will, of course, be many local permits that are likely required in county and state or county and city. This is the current desired schedule. Like I said, we're in the routing study now. We want to move into permitting in the next few years, and the desire would be to have constructed in 29 with an in-service time frame of 2032. That's our current desired plan. Okay, last slide is just, this is the guy to talk to. If you have any questions or calls, you can send them to me. I'll answer whatever I can for you or get you answers. Other than that, if you have any other additional questions, I can answer today.
Cindy, did you have anything you wanted to answer? Add on?
I'll just reinforce the community working groups. We actually have another consultant working with us, Chris right behind me.
Okay.
Chris Edmonds, he and his team are working with the communities to identify folks to participate. And we anticipate that we'll have, like John said, a variety of people from diverse backgrounds and diverse interests. There'll be anywhere from 10 to 15, possibly 20 on each group. There'll be a group in the south, in the populated area of the south, Lake County and this county, Lake County and Klamath, yes, thanks. That was 2 weeks ago. And then one up here in the north. And the group will meet at key milestones in the routing study. And we anticipate having the groups convened later this summer, about July, and that's when we'll start. We'll also have public open houses in the study area so that people can be informed about the project and kept up to date. And the other materials and products that John mentioned on that one slide, we'll keep those up to date so that people can go to that website and see what the progress has been.
Thank you. And it's actually approximately only 180 miles then,
Currently, yes, the
Okay.
first half, yes,
the first half from Lake County to here.
yes.
Is this, you showed us the towers and it's high voltage. Is there any opportunity to go below ground on this, or for high voltage, you don't do that?
We don't for numerous reasons. The cost is pretty exorbitant for undergrounding lines. And you know, we have a responsibility to keep the rates as low as possible. And since the construction of this is something that could be sought back in rates, going underground would impact rates. Additionally, the environmental impacts, I know most people are looking at just the fact that I see this line for the rest of my life. The environmental impacts in undergrounding a line are pretty significant, and they are long lasting. And I mentioned this, especially when I'm down in Cape Falls area. I started this work I started in the group I'm in about 10 or 15 years ago, and they were doing the gas line through down there by Berlin. And I watched them put in the construction, and I can go today and I can still walk you right to where they are, because the impacts from undergrounding that pipeline were so severe that it's still not recovered. And it would be worse for undergrounding a line like this. Additionally, maintenance of an underground line is specialized, and it's people we don't have. So any outages of a line of this nature that would be underground, it would be extended, because currently we'd have to go to the East Coast in order to get the people who are trained to repair underground lines. So there are a bunch of reasons why we don't do it. I don't ever want to say it can't be done, it's just not, it's not the right thing to do for us.
Can I just add something? Unlike a distribution line that you can actually bury fairly easily in a trench, this requires extensive excavation because the line has to be within vaults, and the vaults have to be big enough for a man to be able to get in to do any maintenance work. And so the excavation is very deep. And it's very, very wide and it's very impactful. So, and there has to be a minimum of 36 inches of cover over the top. So it's pretty intrusive and invasive.
Yeah, I could just see somebody asking that question.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, they,
It's a
they
common,
always do, because they do, they look at their distribution lines and they think, well, you put them in there on the cities all the time and sure, 12-volt lines or 11-volt lines, yeah, it's really easy, but 500 kV lines is a whole different animal. It's also not all underground. There are above ground splicing structures, so it's not all underground.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, along those same lines, you say you're going to look at other corridors designated for linear facilities. Is this compatible at all with irrigation canals? There is a tremendous amount of canal piping that is happening in the Central Oregon region, and I'm just wondering if, I mean, the structure that you showed us, I mean, it's pretty hard to imagine putting that on top of an irrigation canal, but there is.
Well, yeah, the structures wouldn't go on top of any existing pipeline type facility like that. We'd have to be offset. And we would span canals themselves. I mean, we'd span rivers, span canals. So the structures would be sited in a way that would not damage or impact the operation of existing facilities.
Right. I think you just answered my question. I mean, I was just trying to because the canal rights of way, they're not probably 250 feet wide, so it might be 100 feet wide, but
No, they're easily spanned. We've spanned them regularly.
you mean travel in parallel.
It's possible depending on where they are and where the route is. Again, it's hard to answer that specifically without having a specific situation. They can be parallel if it makes sense. They can be crossed if that's required. So, yeah, solutions can be found either way.
And then my other question was about, so this, on this environmental and technical analysis slide, you mentioned a whole bunch of factors, kind of features that are going to be considered in this process. I mean, looking at this study area map with that list of, features that are going to need consideration. I mean, are there spots on the map that are just jumping out at you right now? Like, oh, that's, dealing with X in this spot would be very, very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and if so, can you name some of those for us so we get a feel for kind of how you're going to be navigating through this zone?
I think the easiest thing to name would be a lot of the tribal areas that are archaeologically significant. So down in the Chiloquin area, there's archaeological significant land to the tribes. And so when you know that from a tabletop study, you do everything you can to avoid it right from the get-go. There are also, any wetland, any significant forested area that's considered marked pristine by the state that jumps out. What other events?
Airports.
Airports and well, let me just mention that we're in the process of collecting the data for this entire area. It's a GIS exercise. And we pull data from the agency websites. We contact the agencies for their data. So when you see the map, eventually it will be covered with existing and future land uses. We'll be showing examples of the what the effect could be on the landscape from scenic values. We'll be identifying all of the protected species areas, critical habitat, conservation areas, floodplains, wetlands, water crossings, of course, and cultural resources are very sensitive. Most of the resources can be mitigated. And so what we try to do is identify and have a complete inventory of the uses and environmental resources. And then we identify the sensitivity of those. And the more sensitive, the more we stay away from those. And we look for the opportunities, like John said, to parallel existing linear facilities, whether they're transmission lines, pipelines, roads. And we try to, we look at areas that are more compatible with that kind of use with the transmission line. And then we have to look at the impacts that the transmission line could have on those resources and land uses. And once we do that, we're able then to identify mitigation measures to mitigate or reduce those impacts. So it's a very long process and it's pretty tedious. But right now, we're just in the phase of providing that or pulling together that inventory of resources. And we really don't have a good idea yet of where those opportunities are, but we're working on it and we should have some information shortly.
One of the good things that comes out of the community working group meetings, when we meet with them, we actually have the maps that she's referring to that, to my mind, are basically color coded, because one of the questions we get in any public meeting is, well, why can't you go here? Why can't you go here? And those maps that will answer your kind of questions, where you look up and you see tons of red, and that's explained, can't go there. It's not that you can't go someplace. It's that there are numerous problems trying to go there. Here is yellow, where it gets easier to cite, and here are green, and here are the reasons they're green. And when you get those graphics to these working groups, people are more aware that, oh, you really are doing a lot of work to try to get the line to go in the least impactful area. But, you know, as I always mention in any public meeting, there is no non-impactful area. So you're always going to impact something. So we're trying to find through our efforts the least impactful, and we will have maps, as Cindy said, that kind of show that graphic.
And it helps too to have these community working groups, because these are the people who live and work in the area and they understand the land, and they can provide the insight to help us with these alternative routes that we come up with. And we'll have open house meetings, public open house meetings for people to come and look at the alternative routes. And then we'll have another set later on for them to see the progress that we've made. And we'll ask for input from them, because again, these are the people that live and work in the area, and they can provide the insight that's important to the study.
Further questions then? Thank you, Cindy.
My last question would be, so this preliminary schedule with the routing study, you know, being last year and this year. So the maps that you were just describing with the red, green and yellow areas, I mean, when might we be seeing those?
I would say mid-year or fall. It takes quite a while to pull all of the data together and identify those constraints to routing and opportunities for routing.
Okay, thank you, John, Cindy, and Chris. Appreciate having you here today with us.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go to item number 2, work session in preparation for our public hearing. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you for closing the door. Always
Kind of
try.
loud out there.
Sorry.
Oh, not at all. All right, good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, Nicole Mardell, Senior Planner, Deschutes County Community Development. And I'm here this afternoon to prepare you for a public hearing on next Wednesday, April 10th, to consider our comprehensive plan update, the Deschutes County 2040 plan. So the purpose of this preparation session is to give you just a brief background. We'll have a much more extensive presentation during the public hearing, but also to gather any questions that you may have that you'd like us to address at the public hearing, And then also we've heard some interest from commissioners on scheduling some additional public hearings beyond April 10th. So we'll get some direction from you today on those as well. So my brief background, kind of just the highlights. Of course, this is our guiding policy document for growth, development, and resource protection for the rural county for a 20-year period. This has been the culmination of about 2 years of work alongside our consultant, MIG. They've done a really excellent job throughout the process. And at the core of this project was an opportunity to have extensive community conversations. So very rarely in our planning processes can we talk holistically about a lot of issues that pertain to rural community members, things like housing, to natural hazards, to economic development, et cetera. So at the core of this process, we really did as much as we could to get out in the community and talk to people. Our planning commission was very involved in this process as well. So throughout crafting the document, they were really in the meat of it, reviewing our 2010 plan, goals and policies, reviewing the public comment that we had received during our open houses and engagement events, and providing recommendations to us as staff and the consultant on how things should change. And in particular, they were really focused on ensuring that this was a really balanced plan. So the planning commission, and you probably have seen it in attachment A and some of the items in the memo that I provided, they really wanted to ensure that this plan didn't have any winners or losers, that all of our policies were really balanced and representative of the variety of perspectives that community members have in Deschutes County. So with that, they also were very involved in our initial public hearing process. They led 3 public hearings and 4 deliberations meetings. And that ultimately led to a recommendation of approval of the plan subject to the revisions in attachment A. Some of these were revisions based on the public comments and also were minor edits based on some comments we received from agencies related to terminology. So for instance, Central Oregon Irrigation District provided some edits on best practices and how to describe their operations. Same with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Deschutes Historical Society. So with that, that all led to the plan that you see today, which is our March 15th draft. And I wanted to note that another one of our project goals was to provide an easy to read document for all community members. So we wanted a high school student, one of which did participate in our process, to be able to navigate this, as well as a seasoned land use attorney. So making it a nice resource for a variety of folks. Additionally, I wanted to note in our scope, we did not include any amendments or changes to the county's Goal 5 inventories, so those are the same. We've reformatted them to have the same font, essentially as the rest of the document, but otherwise no changes there. And we did not include any updates to our community plans. Those are better updated individually, just so that we can engage the community on those particular issues. Additionally, the TSP, as that was done through a separate process, you'll note in our transportation section, we just refer directly to that document. So with that, before getting into scheduling some potential additional public hearings, I wanted to ask if the board has any questions that you'd like us to address during the public hearing, or any questions about my presentation today.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
There's initials here, SHPO. What does that stand for? It's with the tribes?
Yes, the State Historic Preservation Office.
Okay,
SHPO.
thank you.
But that's a great note.
I mean, I think when you write things out, I don't know, maybe it was ahead of it, but when I got there, I was like, okay, what is SHPO?
Yeah, great note there for us to revisit, make sure we, spell
Spell
that
it out. Okay, thank you so much. I'll write that down.
I got a couple kind of just words or terminology notes. I know we're just going into the public hearing, so just information. So for the attachment A that was provided, Planning Commission's work, and I want to thank them for all the work they did. Sounds like they spent a lot of time on this. So page 25 of our packet, I think, so chapter 3, Farm and Forest Land, it talks, the statement in the middle says use of rural reserves. So just, the terminology, I don't have a good feel for what that is. So it's a definition of rural reserve. So it says work cooperatively with irrigation districts, public agencies and representatives and landowners to promote and support agricultural uses and operations in including through use of rural reserves. Just the definition of what that is.
Yes, so rural reserves comes directly from our Oregon Administrative Rule. It's an option that we have as a county working with cities. So the city has an urban growth boundary. They have the opportunity to select urban reserves, which would be their 50-year land supply. And then there's also the opportunity for rural reserves, which is looking at I'm looking at Nick because I know you're familiar with this. Where you're looking at a bit farther. In Deschutes County, I don't believe we've ever taken advantage of that, and it is a pretty complicated process, but there was some interest in potentially exploring that option.
You have any,
Sure.
so urban reserves is where future growth will occur. Rural reserves are where it won't occur for 50 years. So the Portland metro area, for example, adopted both urban reserves and rural reserves. The rural reserves are going to be those farmlands around the metro area. And this language, the rural reserves, were actually added in the 2010 update when Peter and I were going through the process and planning commissioners expressed interest in. Let's just have a policy. I don't have that specific language in front of me, but it was something like consider rural reserves in the future or something like that. It was really general.
Well, yeah, so it's kind of like for commissioners, for readability, maybe it's a footnote, this is a state term in land use, because as I said, I just didn't have a way to put it in context as I was reading that paragraph, that's all it was. Because I understand the concept now, but
So I just as I was reading through the changes to the draft in the staff memo, there were a couple of things, there were a couple of points where I think that they still, well, even the original draft, these suggested revision to the draft, there's inaccuracies in the way that things are being described. And in some cases, there's kind of too much emphasis on one thing and not enough emphasis on another. I'll give some examples. So one inaccuracy was the description of irrigation water coming from reservoirs. It says the majority of irrigation in Deschutes County comes from reservoirs, when actually the majority of irrigation water rights are for what's called live flow, not for stored water. So that's just kind of, if some of the background is not accurate, then then whatever policy goals flow out of that background may not be appropriate. And an example of like an inaccuracy of emphasis, in chapter 5, there was a discussion about how irrigation, piping of irrigation canals contributes to groundwater level declines. But it's a pretty small part of the overall, the Water Resource Department, the analysis that they did, a decade ago, they said 5/8 of the reason for groundwater declines is climatic. A quarter or 2/8 is too much groundwater withdrawal by various entities, and then 1/8 was canal piping. But this section, when it's talking about groundwater level declines, it only focuses on the canal piping, when too many straws in the ground is basically twice as big a factor in groundwater level decline. So it's kind of a misplaced emphasis in that case. So if you're going to talk about what do we need to do to address groundwater declines, we should be talking about first, well, you can mention that we can't do anything about the climate. And then you can say the next biggest reason for groundwater level declines is groundwater pumping. And then, this canal piping is also a contributing factor, but it's not the big thing to emphasize, for example. So, so I had maybe 6 or 7 of those. And I could share those now, or I could wait until, we could do that at some other point before the hearings. But I'm just trying to understand what the right point in the process is, because this is not supposed to, we're not deliberating it, right? So what is the right point in the process for me as commissioner to provide that?
That's a great question, Commissioner. I might look to Stephanie behind me, but I think, you know, I would assume that at any point you could submit those concerns to staff. And as we mentioned, you know, part of today is understanding what questions you may have so that we can come prepared to the public hearing, potentially with additional information. So I would say unless you know, Stephanie has any concerns, you could potentially send those to staff. As soon as
Is there a
today.
more time efficient way for me to do that than writing you pages of comments?
I think you could also share them at the public hearing. You know, I don't
Right.
anticipate that the board will enter deliberations on that day. So if you, of course, mention something during the public hearing and direct staff to, you know, provide more information, you could say it verbally, and then we could provide additional written information into the record that way. Or follow up in a subsequent hearing.
That works.
Right, right. Any questions or concerns or inaccuracies that you have identified? You know, having that discussion with your fellow board members and then coming up with, you know, an agreed direction to staff, that works. And I forgot to say Stephanie Marshall.
You
legal
did.
Counsel. Did I say that?
No, you didn't.
I forgot.
I know. But Nicole said you were coming up.
I know. Stephanie Marshall, Assistant Legal Counsel. All right.
Nicole, thank you so much for removing Northern from Fall Legal. I had one fly right over my head. I think it was Saturday. It was unbelievable. I know. They're right there at my house, and at least I haven't eaten my cats yet, so.
Well, yeah, so I may have a couple input items just like that, just that it's kind of wordsmithing, and I would lean towards readability. Just like that first item I just mentioned, you know, maybe just a footnote, you know, when you say rural reserves are referring to the state land use system reference. So readability of the document will be priority, but yeah, there'll be some good policy discussions also.
Well, thank you. Any other questions or information, or should we move on to scheduling for additional hearings?
I think we may move on.
Perfect. So yes, we heard from commissioners that there's some interest in providing some additional hearing opportunities out and about in the county and additional locations. So I've been working with Brenda and some of our venues to identify potential venues and hearing dates and times. So we're proposing a hearing at the Sun River Homeowners Association Rec Center, the Shark, on Tuesday, April 23rd. And the board has a couple of options for a hearing start time. It could either be at 2:30 p.m., 3 p.m., or 4 p.m. That would allow us to have about, you know, 2 hours for a hearing before those venues would need to close. Additionally, on Tuesday, April 30th, there's an option to have a hearing at the Sisters City Hall. Similar start times for those 2 p.m., 3 p.m., or 4 p.m. And we were hoping to hold these hearings in April because we know that you'll start the budget process in May, so we assume that you'll be very busy. But just wanted to offer those for your consideration, but happy to hear if you have other ideas for venues or if other dates and times work better for you.
Do you feel that that early or mid-afternoon is gonna work for the community that wants to testify?
I think it's providing a nice option. Our planning commission hearings, of course, are always in the evening. They're 5:30 p.m. typically beginning. And you'll be having likely a morning hearing next Wednesday. So I think it provides a nice opportunity for folks who have a break midday, or, you know, we have heard from some folks that they are able to, you know, take a break from work and attend. I think during the psilocybin hearing, we did have an afternoon hearing that was well attended. So we think that it would be a fitting option.
Thank you, Brenda, for putting the holds on our calendar. That works really well. But yes, I can, yes. Yes, either way it goes, either the 2:30 start time, or if you want to be consistent, have both of them at 3.
In Sisters also, you're saying?
Well, yeah, what, you know, I know I have a commitment for lunch on Tuesday, the 23rd, so 2:30 really works. I couldn't be there any earlier than 2:30.
So 3 o'clock sounds good though.
Yeah, 3 for both times. Would that be okay?
Can I just ask, so if we do a 2:30 or 3 o'clock start time, does that span into evening hours or past 5 hours, so that people who can't get to a hearing until after 5 would be able to do that? Or I heard you say 2 hours, is the assumption that you start at 3, you're gonna be done at 5?
Typically, yes. So for each of these venues for Sister City Hall, they close at 5 p.m. and wouldn't have staff available to us for them to remain open past that time. And with the Shark, they have evening events. So I think with that 3 p.m. start time, we would assume for about 2 hours for those hearings. At the planning commission hearings, we didn't have many people testify in person or virtually. It was mostly through written comment. So we think that 2 hours, based on some of the attendance we're seeing so far, should be sufficient. But I defer to the board.
I also worry that, this comprehensive planning process has been very abstract to people for a long time, but now that it's getting close to landing, maybe people will get more engaged who haven't been really engaged in the past, especially, some of the issues that are being discussed are very top of brain for a lot of people in our community right now. I would like for people to be able to come after 5 p.m., but I appreciate that with these couple of venues that you've reserved, it doesn't sound like that's possible. So even you put 4 p.m. as options on.
That would assume a reduced start time of about an hour. So it would be 4 to 5 p.m.
Okay.
For the City of Sisters specifically.
So I feel like 3 to 5 is,
Yes.
I mean,
would be
if
the
somebody
ideal.
knows they really want to get there and they know we're gonna be there until 5, they could always leave work at the very end and come over if they wanted to make a public testimony.
Yes.
So
So
this is legislative, so if somebody has input, they can talk to us, they can send an email, we can get it in the record, we can have a discussion, so this is outreach in the community, but yeah, anybody can talk to us at any time.
So it sounds like we'll move forward with a Sun River Shark hearing on Tuesday, April 23rd, starting at 3 p.m. and the same for a Sister City Hall hearing on Tuesday, April 30th at 3 p.m. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, commissioners, and look forward to seeing you next week.
thank you. Oh, and thank you again for coming back to the county. I don't know if I told you that this month. It's first of April, so thank you.
Big project, congratulations. We're getting
Yeah.
there.
Thank you, commissioners.
Appreciate having you. Okay, item number 3.
Just a visual aid I'd like to distribute before we get started. if
Sure,
that's
that'd be
okay.
great. Thank you so much.
Sure, Jane.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's really like.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Nathaniel Miller, Associate Planner with the Planning Division. The item we are here to discuss this afternoon is a work session item to prepare for a public hearing on Wednesday, April 10th. The proposal is for a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use in the multiple use agricultural zone. Some background on the location and the proposal: the applicants, Dwayne and Dina Barker, requested a conditional use permit to establish a winery. The request also includes a site plan review for the winery and the associated uses. The property is located at 20520 Bowery Lane and is just north of the city of Bend. The proposal includes the conversion of an existing barn for small-scale wine production and wine storage. There's currently a vineyard on the property and no new buildings or structures are included in this request. The approval would include the production of up to 2,000 cases of wine annually, as well as hosting wine-related events, wine tasting, wine dinners, and other wine marketing events. About the hearing officer decision and approval, briefly, the Deschutes County Hearings Officer rendered a final decision approving the applicant's request for a conditional use permit for the winery on January 2nd of 2024. The staff memo outlines some of the important aspects of this decision. The appellant, Kobe Bayard, submitted a timely appeal to the hearings officer decision on January 9th. The appellant requested the board initiate a review, conduct a hearing to evaluate a number of issues. These are also outlined in the staff memo. The goal of the work session today is to understand how we can best prepare the board for the hearing and what specific parts of the application the board would like to know more about. As for helping us plan, staff would like to know if there are specific issue areas the board would like to have addressed from staff, the applicant, or the appellant during the public hearing. Staff would also like the board's preference on in setting time limits for the applicant and or members of the public providing testimony. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions and or direction from the board.
Should we talk about time limits first?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So our standard time limits have been 30 minutes for the applicant, 30 minutes for the appellant, and 3 minutes for public testimony. And then we also allow for a 10-minute rebuttal from the applicant.
Rebuttal. Okay, I think we should go with those.
So issue on appeal, the ORS 215452 about EFU zone. I can do my homework, but maybe touch base with you or whoever can help me kind of understand the big picture. But I just think about that as relative to other counties in the state of Oregon, maybe this is how we'll be having to learn about this. It kind of fits into the second item to refer to MUA 10 zone properties. So just doing a little bit of homework on that. Okay. Or, starting point for deliverable is, the record where it mentions that from the hearings officer, and then just I can run with that and learn about it. Okay.
When we had the discussion about whether the board was going to hear this or not, this appeal or not, I expressed interest in the whole Hunnell Road construction situation, and wanting to understand whether, basically what I want to evaluate whether it really is feasible to get people to this winery location from Hunnell Road without going around, like a direct access from Hunnell Road. And I believe that depends to some degree on where Hunnell Road end up going on that very south end, because there was an original vision for where it was going to be configured with the city, and then it sounded like a lot of that was it went back up in the air, and it was uncertain what the new alignment of Hunnell Road was going to be. So I would definitely like to have that information for this hearing.
Sure. I did reach out to the Deschutes County Road Department, and the projected timeline of March 31st being completed with Hunnell Road has been extended to May 31st. But I think to your point, Commissioner Chang, I can go back to the road department and ask for specifics just to make sure that the appropriate access is there.
Well, there's also this question of, I'm not quite sure where County Hunnell Road ends and where City Hunnell Road begins here. And it was the City Hunnell Road piece that was potentially going to be completely moved. So beyond just knowing what the completion timeline is going to be for the County Hunnell Road project, what I would really want to understand is what's going on with that, with the city piece.
Okay.
And I did drive on Hunnell Road, and it's probably within the city, to the Deschutes Memorial Gardens on Friday afternoon. And there was not one homeless RV on that road. Because like 2 years ago, I tried to go down that way and it was just on both sides of the road. So it was, I'm sure that's within the city, but there were no homeless people. So I'm sure that those motels and businesses that operate there really appreciate the return to less traumatic times. Are there any other questions? This is not this Wednesday, but it's the following Wednesday.
Correct. Yeah, this is set up for Wednesday, April 10th.
And there were 33 conditions with the hearings officer, were there not?
There were quite a few, yes.
Yes, 33, so. That was rather unique, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. As we discussed in the consideration here, I think we'd like to have a little bit more definition around those conditions of approval. So I'll be crafting a staff memo and I'll include those conditions of approval in the staff memo for your review.
Okay, great.
And yeah, looking at this map, I just remember that, all questions about the water uses and, water rights that are available, and the water use in the area. Is there irrigation flow? Is it a ground pumping, whatever, just to understand all that. As I say, it's maybe in the record again, I'll go read more detail before we get there next Wednesday also.
Okay, and just so there's no confusion, the map that I sent you, the aerial image that I sent you is correct. The site plan, which I included in the visual materials for today, this is their latest round of the site plan review. It's not the one that's been requested by the hearings officer. So just so you know what you're looking at. We would be anticipating another site plan review to address some of the specifics around those conditions of approval that were in the hearings officer's decision.
So this has been evolved since the hearings officer decision, is that what you're saying? It's different?
Not yet. This is the latest site plan review that we have. But as you're reviewing, if you review the conditions of approval that were in the hearings officer decision, you will see about how he talked about needing a revised site plan, which illustrated.
That's what they've done.
and depicted. Yeah, this was the site plan before that.
Oh, okay.
So this is one that was associated with the hearings officer decision.
Correct.
That was good clarity.
Yeah.
So then we're gonna get another one.
We're gonna look to the applicant for that revised site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any other?
Do they have enough time to get it done then? I mean, by a week, I want to see the new site plan, the recommended revised site plan?
There's a couple ways we could address it. I mean, the applicant certainly could try to provide a site plan at the time of the hearing, or we could have an open record period, at which time they have enough.
They could put it,
They
okay,
can put it-
submit it at that.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
All right. We'll look forward, if there's no other questions or concerns, we'll look forward to seeing you at the hearing next week.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we're at item number 4, Caldera Springs. Haley, is that you? Yes. Good afternoon, Haley.
Afternoon. For the record, Hallie King.
Oh, I always
Associate
said-
Planner. Yeah,
Holly.
yeah.
Okay,
No,
sorry,
all good,
I have all these
thanks.
nieces named Haley, so.
Yeah. No worries, interesting spelling. Yeah, again, for the record, good afternoon, Commissioners. Hallie King with Community Development. This item before you today is a brief work session item, really just to set the table for this Wednesday for this to return as a consent agenda item. And this is a new improvement agreement associated with Caldera Springs. This latest one is their phase C2 of their overnight lodging unit subdivision. And it's essentially to submit a bond for road and utility infrastructure improvements that they have not yet completed, but want to move forward with platting the lots. And I know the board, you guys have seen a few of these before, but this will essentially allow them to formally plat the lots without finishing those improvements. But obviously we have a bond that they'll eventually complete. And so staff has coordinated with the road department on the cost estimate and the bond amount, coordinated with legal counsel as well. This one's a little bit unique in that they're also, in addition to the 7 lots in phase C2, they're also including some unfinished improvements in phase C1. We're capturing that in this new agreement. And that, again, is going to be tied in with the phase C2, the bond amount is reflective of those additional remaining improvements that they have to build.
So question then, so
Yes.
there was a bond for the first phase. Are we saying goodbye to one bond and then capturing everything in the one product,
Essentially, yes, yeah, so we'll obviously proceeding with signatures on this, then we'll go back to phase C1, make an amendment of that one, because they've completed about 80% of that. But we're bringing in what they haven't in this new bond amount, yeah, so that's captured. Yeah, and so again, this is a consent item for this Wednesday, but just wanted to set the table, answer any questions at the outset.
question about the logic of moving that unfinished item to a new bond. I mean, wouldn't the previous bond just stand on its own, or they want to be able to reduce the size of it or something?
They want to essentially have us release the bond, they'll submit the warranty, because once they finish those improvements, they have to provide the
1-year warranty on those improvements. So essentially, they want to just warranty what's been completed, but still, if
So it
a
makes-
portion's
It
unaccounted
makes it
for.
smaller, what needs to be bonded, maybe?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Just trying to understand.
Yeah, no, it's a little
concept
bit
of it,
unique.
yeah.
We're gonna be coordinated with legal counsel. We think this is a good way to make sure we're capturing those uncompleted improvements.
Yes, I'm hearing that the projects are going really well.
Yeah, there seem to, people in building permits. It sounds like they're phase D. They're anticipating that for the year 2025. That's what they've let us know for tentative subdivision review.
Okay, 25.
2025, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
they have a few more, I think, lots to build out, but yeah.
Well, we're in 24 now, so that's not very far away.
It's
So amazing. Okay,
Yeah,
good. Wonderful.
okay. Well, no questions. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Yes,
Okay, all
Thank
right,
you so
thank you.
Holly.
Yes.
Yes. I will never forget again. I will write it down. Big
All
letter.
good.
Okay, item number 5. I see like the room was entered at the appropriate time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, commissioners. For the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. And I'm joined with Sherry Pinner, our management analyst, who will eventually get her screen up to share an overview of our 3 concepts or proposals. But if I may, I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes in light of the Ben Bulletin had an editorial about this topic on Sunday, and KTVZ also had a piece this morning. So just for anyone who's listening, I think it's important just to explain kind of what our expectations are today, how we got here, and just provide some clarifying remarks. So today, the Community Development Department is seeking direction from the board as it pertains to a budget proposal for fiscal year 25. We're going to present 3 options for the board's consideration. Each one relies on fee increases and a bridge from our contingency funds, specifically Fund 300, which is our reserve fund that covers all the divisions except building safety and our electrical program. So CDD right now is experiencing some structural budget challenges as a fee-dependent department. And this is a reflection on conservative budget estimates over a 5-year period. And we have a shortfall of approximately $1.4 million that is a part of our budget proposal is being made up again through fee increases and a reliance on our reserve funds. I want to underscore that CDD's budget is not vulnerable immediately. What we wanted to do, and this is based on, it's hard to predict the future. It's based on a 5-year budget estimate. But what we wanted to begin the conversation with the board, to get the board to begin thinking about is the level of services that you're expecting from the Community Development Department and our ability to pay for them. And in 5 to 6, 6 to 8 year horizon, based on our budget projection and the reliance on our reserve funds, we won't be able to make that bridge, all things being equal. We won't be able to cover the $1.4 million structural gap. And so to respond specifically to KTVZ's coverage this morning, I want to emphasize that the Community Development Department is not proposing layoffs today. The 8 positions that we are proposing to remove for fiscal year 2025 are 8 unfunded positions. So again, we're not proposing any layoffs and
Unfunded, unfilled?
unfilled, I may have said unfunded, unfilled, sorry. Unfilled positions. Thank you for that clarification. So these are unfilled positions that we want to eliminate, and it just reflects our budget challenges. And then in light of the bulletin's editorial, if you would like, very briefly, I can give you some context in terms of what it would mean in terms of level of service reductions in the event that we didn't have a bridge to cover that $1.4 million gap. So this will just take a second. Please. Okay, so $1.4 million equates to approximately between 7 to 8 FTEs. And if we were required to eliminate them, it would impact long-range planning, current planning, code enforcement, and possibly permit technicians. And I want to recognize there's no easy options, and this is just an example. It's not something that I'm proposing now, it's just to put it into context. And we would, of course, we ever found ourselves in a position like this, I would be looking for board direction. Because we're very lean right now, and this has significant service impact. So long-range planning, to start there, currently has 3 FTEs. A fourth, Tarek Rawlings, who you've had the privilege of interacting with on the transportation system plan, starting in 2025, his position will be paid for from the road department. So separating Tarek, we have 3 FTEs today. If we had to deal with a $1.4 million structural deficit, we would go from 3 to 1. So what does that mean? We would basically have one planner who would be responsible for coordinating with our cities. There's the ability to take on one annual long-range large project. And then, if possible, as we would fill it in, annual housekeeping amendments. So 3 to 1 in a county that's one of the few counties in the state of Oregon, certainly of our size, that's still growing. Current planning would go from 7 FTE to 4. And what that would mean is I would recommend eliminating our performance measures for current planning. As you know, we're obligated under state law to issue land use decisions within 150 days. We would be meeting that 150th day deadline. We'd be on that end of the spectrum versus our performance measures today are anywhere between 25 and 40 days for those applications that don't require going to a hearing. Customer inquiries, pre-application meetings would be delayed. Applicant initiated plan amendment zone changes, which are not subject to the 150th day, and applicant initiated legislative amendments, we would figure out how to process them ideally semi-annually, but probably annually, just based on our immediate demands. Lastly, code enforcement, which currently we just hired a 4th code enforcement officer. They start on May 1st. We would have to go from 4 to 2. And I would be interested in having a conversation with the board in light of that. Do we have a meaningful conversation about returning solid waste enforcement, which we have a contract under solid waste, giving that program or those responsibilities back to solid waste so that the 2 code enforcement officers could focus in on building land use on-site related violations. Now, invariably, when you have those types of violations, solid waste regularly becomes a violation as well, but I would be looking for guidance there. So again, that's 7 FTEs right there. 1.4 million is between 7 and 8. So if we had to add another FTE, it would potentially impact our lobby, our permit technicians. Right now, we have 4 permit technicians. We're in a position to have 5 starting in April 15th. And I know how sensitive the board is about making sure our hours we're open, we're available. I worry about impacts to the lobby to the extent that we had to get into 8 FTEs. I just have 2 more comments, and then we can answer your questions, and Sherry can give you what we've proposed. You've heard this from me in the past that our department is responding to significant inquiries from the general public for pre-application requests, just vetting potential projects, as Commissioner DeBonne and I dealt with on Friday, demands that come with an operation and maintenance program with our alternative treatment technologies. Much of that work, which is a necessity, doesn't immediately translate into development activity. But we have reached a point, in my opinion, where we are so involved, so invested in community development that this level of customer service is essential so that the public can make informed decisions. We can stay on top of responsibilities, as I mentioned, for example, with alternative treatment systems, so we can have pre-apps for opportunities, for example, with rural accessory dwelling units. So I worry about that level of customer service being diminished with, by having a challenge of building that bridge to this kind of $1.4 million structural budget challenge that we have. The last thing that I did, and I want to thank the budget officer and their team during our preliminary meetings that we had about 2 weeks ago, is I went ahead and reached out to the other community development departments that align with ours. And so I reached out to Lane County. Lane County matches our department almost precisely. They have 45 FTEs. We right now have 45 FTEs. They have a $2.1 million supplement to the fees that are generated by land use applications and building valuation. That supplement comes from lottery funds and other sources. Their land use application fees, just for context, it's not across the board. I've written down some examples if you're interested, but their land use application fees for the regular applications tend to be several hundred, if not a few $1,000s more expensive than ours. Plan amendment zone changes, for example, in Lane County are $3,000 more than what we charge. The other county, just for comparison, it's not a perfect one, as well as Clackamas County. Clackamas County doesn't do long range planning in the metro area. Those responsibilities are absorbed by that regional government, but their funds they have supplements through general fund. So we are unique here in terms of from what I understand and the research that we have done. Deschutes County's Community Development Department is the only county department in Oregon that really tries to be fee dependent. And so I just offer that for your perspective. Again, more than anything, we want to just begin having a conversation about having you think about the levels of services you expect from CDD. And I'll just reinforce and then stop, is that we're not in a budgetary crisis now. It's just we're aware of this kind of budget vulnerability or structural challenge on the horizon, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, assuming our budget projections, which are conservative, were to be somewhat accurate. So thank you for giving me this
So
opportunity.
2009-10, there was subsidies for the department to keep it rolling during a recession, right? I mean, any reserves that were gone, and then all of a sudden it was general fund keeping the doors, keeping the level of service where we wanted it, I guess, is when I got started on this. So I mean, it has been done before. Now there's reserve, and generally we're riding it down for a while here. I think it's going to come back though. We have to dial this in, but I mean, development activity, it just feels like it's a narrow path that's going to open up here at some point, but in the city of Bend and La Pine, there's going to be a lot of development, which isn't us. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly where that's going to go. Any communication with the Builders Association on these fee discussions? Because I know that's been part of it in the past, notifying our partners who are out there putting these things together.
Yeah, so I did, so what I did is, after our preliminary budget meeting with the budget officer and his team, I immediately reached out and spoke to Morgan Greenwood, who is the government affairs liaison for Central Oregon Builders Association. Let her know of what we were gonna be doing to prepare for this meeting, and a forthcoming memorandum that Sherry and I worked on that weekend, and then to put us in a position a week ago to make sure that we had adequate time to get this information to you. As soon as this information was uploaded, which occurred on last Monday, I called Morgan and just let her know that it had been uploaded. And then, the conversation that I had with her, which was the Friday before, she was aware of it. I think she was likely on a early spring break. She has younger children that she's chasing around. So she was acknowledging that she was gonna be reaching out if possible to the board. I don't know if that has happened, but we wanted to be as transparent and forthright as possible. So that was the outreach that we did as soon as possible.
We've just got a good history of communicating back
Yep.
and forth, because they're representing a lot of people out there doing
Absolutely.
projects.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I told Morgan that I was available, Sharon and I were available, which was last week, if she had any questions, and I suspect she was distracted hopefully by something that was enjoyable for a spring break vacation, but those are the efforts that we did.
Sure, do you remember how many employees we had in March of 2021, or Peter? I'm just wondering how many.
It would have been less than 72. I know we had 72 in January of 2023.
Okay, but what about in 21? Okay, so what did you say, 73?
72 in January of 20.
Okay, so we've considerably gone down.
And what we did, and credit to Sherry and her monitoring of the budget, is in the start of 2022, calendar year 2022, we started seeing revenue adjusting. It was actually, we were seeing less revenue in relationship to some of our expenditures, and it just so happened that over the course of the next 18 months, we had a number of employees that had opportunities that took them elsewhere from our department. And so we had natural attrition that really contributed to kind of helping us kind of right size our budget to where it is today. It wasn't everything. We had to make some tough decisions in the last fall, but had we not had natural attrition at the rate that we did, we would have had to make some even tougher decisions to get our budget in a situation where it was somewhat right sized.
Quite some period of time, we carried a good number of FTE that were unfilled, so anywhere from 14 to 16
Right.
for quite some time.
Back in that 2009, 2010 period, when we reached a point where county general fund was really needed to stabilize the department, what were staffing levels like then?
It went as low as 28 FTE, and I want to say it was right around that time period. So the combined reserve funds and then also general fund to correct that situation was about 11 point something million. About half of it came from general fund, half of it came from reserves.
And I would add that at the time we didn't know that we were entering a great recession. So from what I understand, there was this, we were burning through our reserve fund thinking, oh, this is just a mild recession, only to find out that it was much more significant. One of the things that, and this has been communicated, I think, to the board in the past, is one of the things that we benefited from when we had 28 employees is that the employees that were able to be retained had significant institutional knowledge. People like Paul Blickstad and others. We also had contract employees, and the one that I have made mention to is we had Commissioner DeBone, you'll remember Dan Haldeman. And Dan Haldeman happened to retire during the Great Recession, and he was interested in coming back for contract. So he wasn't technically an FTE, but Dan Haldeman, for Commissioner Chang and Commissioner Adair, he was once the manager of our on-site wastewater division. So it would be like cloning Todd Cleveland. And I say that with some utmost respect. This was someone that knew the division inside and out and could give us the hours that we could afford. And that utility, his productivity was just something that you couldn't replicate. So we brought on some planners over time that were laid off that could come in and assist us. And so that provided a bridge. And they weren't technically FTE, they were under contract, and we could manage as we slowly climbed out of the recession. We eventually could terminate those contracts and then bring FTEs back on, but they were instrumental. I can't imagine not having someone like Dan Haldeman during in a period like the Great Recession, where we could just lean on him with the few staff that we had for those responsibilities.
What comes to mind is kind of the next 12 months to, if interest rates change, or if building material costs go down, or at least if things stabilize, people feel more confident to build, it'd be a whole different conversation. And it might be that way next year, but we don't know.
Yeah, we are not, we agree. We are also want to be optimistic that indicators and factors will change. And I think this might be a good segue just to share with you the three options that we wanted your consideration. And they have a different burn rate through the reserve fund. So we're totally, whatever option or direction you want to provide us, again, we're in a good position now to the staff that are listening to us. And I know that there are a few. We want to reinforce that we are committed to the levels of service that we're providing today. As we head into fiscal year 2025, this is just a conversation that gets kind of in that longer horizon line of 5 to 7 years approximately.
And I think it's also important to note that when we talk about concerns about the reserve fund balances, we're really talking about Fund 300 majoritively, because that is the reserve fund that will fund the general TDD departments. So that's admin, coordinated services, planning, on-site, code enforcement. So you guys know that through Deschutes County Code, we are limited on how we can raise our fees. So then we're very limited on how we can replenish that fund. So that's really our concern. The Building Safety Reserve has quite a high balance. And so in the future, if there is an event where they need the increases, we're actually going to spin that down. So we're all in agreement on that. And then the electrical division is kind of bouncing around with a little bit of reserve, but not the full target that we have. So you guys know that we have an internal reserve fund policy where we're targeting anywhere from 12 to 18 months of reserve. So the electrical is certainly not that high, but they're spending some of it this year. So really it's the general reserve fund, the electrical reserve, and building safety will not necessarily be part of this conversation, but there will be some of the calculations that include their reserve fund transfers. So just kind of, I thought it would be helpful to go over kind of a summary of where we are today. So this is the current year, fiscal year 24. We experienced anywhere from 1% to 30% decreasing volumes. We really are completing our second year of decreases, and we have started seeing a slight increase, a trend. So I'm hopeful about that. Our revenue projections are 2.3 million less than we had anticipated. To offset that, we reduced our expenditures by 1.7 million, largely unfilled FTE. We certainly did have 4 layoffs last fall, and they are included in that calculation. Last year, when we met to get direction, we landed on building safety supplemental permits. It's a 4% increase, electrical 15%, code enforcement 0.02 10,000ths of a percentage on the building valuation calculation. Public information and advanced planning were 5 10,000ths of a percent. Land use applications were 15 and on-site were 20. This year so far, we have spent 322,000 of our fund balance, and we've utilized 100 and almost about 200,000 of reserve fund 300. And we'll see how the year plays out. So just a visual of our permitting volume decreases. This is historical. Back to fiscal year 15, we have trended for quite some time now, around the 2014, 15, 2016 permitting volumes. That trend is still continuing. So we will see how that goes. So fiscal year 25 budget highlights. So we are building in anywhere from a 0 to 3% increase. What we are seeing is a turn in our site evaluations, which is an indicator of future development. And so far right now, the number of site evaluations that we are ahead when compared to last year are all related to ADUs. So every single one of those is related to ADUs. I think land use has received 9 applications and we've issued 1 dwelling permit for an ADU. We have 3 that are in review. So that book of business is taking off, if you will. And this is also interesting. The International Code Council, which you guys know, sets the building cost per square foot annually. And we're experiencing a 1% decrease effective April 1st. So it's a little bit of a hit, but not terrible. And our strategies to balance on all 3 options are going to include a combination of fee increases, reserve fund transfers, general fund request for hearings officer services, and transient room tax request for work in our coordinated services and our code enforcement divisions on transient room tax applications. And then, of course, I mentioned the general fund for hearings officer services. Our expenditures, so since January of 2023, we've eliminated 14 FTE. They were unfilled. And we're going to reduce 8 additional unfilled FTE as we go into fiscal year 25. It should leave us with 50 remaining FTE, and it's my understanding that as of today, 3 of those 50 are currently unfilled. So we do have some strategies to not hire those remaining 3 positions until we feel like that they're sustainable. Of course, our expenditures include the 4% COLA, 15% health insurance cost, interfund charge increase, step increases, and general inflationary materials and services, and our hearings officers. And I can tell you that our materials and services budgets are very, very thin. There's not a lot of, we haven't budgeted a lot to travel to conferences. We're really trying to be as efficient as we can with how we spend the resources that we have. So, if it, as Peter alluded to earlier, if it comes down to needing to reduce budgets, there's not a lot of room in materials and services. Any questions? All right, so. And this, I think, is kind of a summary of what we just did. So, I'm gonna go ahead and move to budget option number 1. So this is actually budget option number 1, and I apologize for not catching that. So if we wanted to balance our budget without any vacancy, FTE removal, or any other support through reserves, this would be budget option number 1, which would generate an estimated 1.4 million. So it would include a code compliance increase of 0.7%. Building safety, as I mentioned earlier, would be 0. Electrical would be a 25% increase on applications. On-site wastewater is 14. Current planning applications would be 18. Public information counter would be 0.9% increase. And advanced planning would be 12/10,000. So that would then give us 50 FTE. We'd be able to continue with our succession planning. We, still are kind of in the process of having staff turnover and staff trainings. Our complex applications that are coming in. We certainly have a lot of non-fee generating work that we do. And then in order to balance, this would be budget option. I'm sorry, this is not very well thought out. Would increase 1.08 million. I just went over those particular fee increases. The reserve transfer would still be about $104,000. Much of that would be for building safety, so a spend down of reserve 301. And then I think, when we get to the bottom line, this budget option number 1, which would generate the most revenue and fees, would be about a 13.6% increase to a dwelling permit. That would get our reserve balances. We would be able to maintain 5.1 months in Fund 300. That's still right around 23 months in Fund 301 and 8.8 months in 302. Budget option number 2 would generate about 929,000. Code compliance increase would be 7/10,000%. Electrical permits would be 16%. On-site wastewater 14%, which will stay at 14%. Land use applications 16%. Public information counter 9/10,000%, as well as advanced planning. That would then allow us to utilize about 244,000 of our reserves, which would maintain these fund balances if you look at them on a per month basis. And the additional increase to a dwelling permit would be about 12%.
So these were, how did you come up with these numbers? And I'm just thinking, so building safety at 0%, electric permit 16%. How did, where did that logic come through?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So Deschutes County Code lays out how we are allowed to raise our fees. So basically each division, you populate the expenditures, you populate what you think your revenues are going to be as a basis based on whether or not we think we're going to have an increase or a decrease in permitting volumes. And then we see what the difference is and we sort of figure out what the fee increase would be related to that. And so like onsite is our easiest one with, they just have applications. So that ended up being a 14% increase. You kind of, with logic, right? I say some of their staff, they're all relatively new, so they all get COLAs and steps, and their personnel costs were 13.5% increase. So that seemed reasonable to me, and then you move on to the next division and the next. When you're talking about where to start these calculations, I listened to the director, I listened to the manager's discussions on reserve fund balances and how much we're willing to dip into those in this first year. This year, as we implemented the 5-year projection, it really made it very clear that, we needed to be careful in years 2, 3, 4, and 5, because if we spend our reserves vigorously in year 1 and 2, we don't have a way to replenish those. So that's how we came up with, should we, ask for more fees and hope that the volume comes through to create that revenue and reserve our, hold our reserves for the future, because, that's where it becomes very difficult, is when you're planning today on what your volume is going to be July through June of next year. And then to further sort of explain how our fees work, it's really not until October 1st that we start seeing our new fees of each year, because it can take 2 to 3 months to work through your new your applications that were submitted before June 30th, so the whole fee schedule. And so we're, there's a little bit of like a 3-month delay on receiving those new fee revenues.
And then the code compliance increase at the 0.07, is that setting the number at 0.07 or adding the 0.07 to the current?
It's adding.
Yeah, okay, so just making sure.
Yeah, it is adding. And then the final option that we presented, and then of course we can talk about other options you would like to. This increase would generate about 866,000. So code compliance stays at the 7/10,000. Building safety again is 0. Electrical was 18%, on-site 14%, land use applications 18%, and then public information and advanced planning, I just held those at 7/10,000% increase as well. You can see on the months of operations and our reserve balances, that allows us to maintain our Fund 300, around that 4, almost 5-month balance. And then the increase to a dwelling application would be somewhere around 9.8%.
In the memorandum on pages 2 and 3, Sherry and I coordinated on this piece, but for each option, we allow you to understand what again, all things being equal, our ability to kind of conservatively project out what we think development activity could look like. We acknowledge at the end of fiscal year 2029 where Fund 300's reserve fund is. And so for example, for this option, we would have just over $800,000 in Fund 300, and then so option 3, and then if there's more in the reserve fund based on that 5-year forecast. Option 2, there's a little bit more. Option 1 insulates reserve Fund 300 to a greater degree, but we wanted to give you a sense of that, what that 5-year window looks like. Again, just being conservative of the type of development activity that we possibly could see. So.
So Sherry, I have a question for you. On option 3, the electrical permits and land use applications are both increased 18%, and yet in option 2, they're only 16.
I was just playing with different percentage.
I mean, I
increases
would have
and
thought.
Bend downs of reserves and how
Yeah.
the mechanics of all that works. And really it was, just to find some starting points for conversation, which then led us to these 3 options.
Okay, well, I just would have thought maybe they would have been reversed or something. If option 3 is only generating the 866.
I could have spent hours coming
Yeah,
up with
I
different.
know, but I mean, it just seems like
And I did.
it's not consistent though with what you're, with the first one, with option.
Well,
number
one spends more out of the electrical reserves than the other
Right.
does. And of
Because
course,
electrical,
all that,
25% on the first one.
it's a balance.
Yeah.
If you wanted to use no reserve funds there, that would be to balance.
Okay.
This particular year, I spent an enormous amount of hours just trying to seeing if we could work differently. Like, is there something that I'm not seeing? Have I been doing this job for so long? I just have tunnel vision, if you will. And I didn't come up with anything earth shattering necessarily. But, again, with implementing the 5-year forecast, it really highlighted how little funds we have in Fund 300 to last us if what we're experiencing right now and we have for the past 2 years does not change.
It's not very long. So last week, we heard that the single family residence mortgage interest had gone up like a point. Like, that's not gonna help building.
It's not, and I am unsure, as we all are, of when we will see a change in either interest rates or the economy or confidence, consumer confidence.
And then just, I noted in the footnote, one of the, I can't remember, I think both KTVZ and the Ben Bolton acknowledged just the cost of living in Deschutes County today is so different than it was just a few years ago. And just acknowledging that if that remains in place, that regardless if interest rates come down a point or two, we're still kind of faced with those realities as well. So it helped inform why we were so conservative. We'd love to be proven wrong and development activity picks up. But we have 2 years of context, and as you just noted, Commissioner Adair, interest rates are not
They're not very
going.
helpful.
I mean, your treasury
Higher for longer.
director said, the feds are projecting that the interest rates will go down, but they're gonna wait and see what inflation does. And so we didn't want to be aggressive in our permitting volume just for the sake of this conversation. And the other thing that all 3 of you are well aware is it has taken us years to even build the reserve. It's very easy to build the reserves in funds 301 and 302. We match our revenues with expenditure. In years past, when growth was higher than forecasted, revenue coming from building, that's under state law, goes right into funds 301, 302, which is why they have Fund 301 as a 23.5-month reserve. For the other divisions and the fees or the activity that exceeded our forecast, you just don't see that large of an amount, which is why our reserve fund is at approximately 5 months. So, at some point, we need to be thinking about having a reserve, maintaining reserves, but right now we're just mindful of the burn rate over a 5-year forecast. And as Sherry noted, and it's worth reiterating, our internal policy is to try to have reserves set at between 12 and 18 months, averaging kind of 15 months. And Fund 300 is obviously has some vulnerability to it over the course of several years if nothing changes.
well, it's fascinating, if you look at your graph on our page 310. We're really, even considering the growth of the region and the county, so many things are just way down. Looking back at 15, it would be fascinating if you could go back to what, 6, 7, whenever. You know, I know in 6, it was really booming, 2006, I believe that, and then it started going the other way. So,
Yeah, I know in 2016, we had 36 FTE, 2015 was 34, and 2014 was 30. So I think during that Great Recession time period, we were definitely around that 28. And then, of course, climbing out of 2016, 17, 18, we really started hiring. And then we landed at 72 FTE at January of 2023. And many of those were unfilled at that time.
And we, as you will recall, even when we were coming out of the Great Recession, I mean, representing a division at that time as planning manager, we were always really cautious. Are we really seeing demands? Are we okay? We'll add, we were always reacting. And so and that's, I think, appropriate when you're a fee dependent department. So we were always kind of waiting, looking around. Okay, the indicators, the revenue, the demands on staff, we would add +1 across divisions. And we're in a totally different cycle now.
And another experience we're having in, for example, current planning is their land use applications are definitely still at a deficit position, but the applications that we are receiving, they're kind of our easier applications. There are lower fees. So just because you get 200 applications one year doesn't mean they'll generate the same amount the next year based on whether it's a plan amendment zone change, which would be more complicated, more complex with a higher fee versus some of our lot of records, which would be a lower.
well, I could say at least someone is building a beautifully gorgeous house like 2 miles from mine.
Oh, good.
Yes, so,
And that is it's important acknowledging that when we were in the midst of the Great Recession and the general fund was providing life support, we weren't seeing hardly any development activity. That's
Right.
not true today, right? We're seeing, activity at a 2016 level. So, we had a coordination meeting with our coordinated services team, and they had, what did they say? They got 115 applications. Yeah. So I mean,
But that includes the supplementals.
right. But so the point is there's activity today. We're not and for anyone listening at home, we're not at all communicating that development has slowed to a trickle. It's just the trends that we are so accustomed to, if you exclude the Great Recession, for decades, we were always seeing tremendous development activity that exceeded more often than not, our budget estimates. And for the last 2 years, it's come in below. Yeah.
And we had so much activity during the pandemic, and then there was fiscal year 21 where we didn't get these any of our divisions because of the volume we experienced in 2020. So we sort of play this game of try to make some projections, and hopefully they're somewhat accurate, but it's hard to tell. Certainly, if you have a year where you under projected your volume, you forego fee increases next year, and so hopefully it balances out over time.
well, I know that when I met with Nick today, we were looking at possibly some different options in order to supplement your program, I believe. So do you need a decision from us today? It says, what direction?
Well, the direction, I would request direction just so that we don't hold up the budget team from preparing all of their budget documents, because I have not submitted a budget.
And the info we give right now will play into the fee schedule, which will then help to drive the budget development. Yeah. One more question about the staffing levels over time. Code compliance, code enforcement activity. I mean, how does that vary through these different periods of more and less new development activity? I mean, during the Great Recession, I'm guessing that there were people that say like, oh, everything's fine, no code complaints in my neighborhood, or did that slow down significantly as well?
I would say, I mean, you were closer to I am. I mean, we had at one point, I think, one code enforcement officer, right? John Griley.
1.5, historically, until maybe 2015-ish. Code complaints would trend with the real estate market as it would increase, so too would people filing complaints. And then as the economy went down during the Great Recession, we just didn't get as many complaints. I think we all know that the residents of Deschutes County have fundamentally changed over the past decade. People are engaging a lot more, be it appeals for a land use or a code complaint, or whatever the case may be. People are just much more engaged all the time.
Well, just an investment of cost, it's a lot of money on buying the house floors.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you could probably, I just don't recall what the number is, but code, I do recall it was 1.5 FTE in the Great Recession, and then as we started to come out, the board approved increases up to 5 at one point. But you could probably look at, and you're gonna know the numbers better than I do, is that 150 cases per code enforcement technician, specialist. I can't remember ballpark what it is, but you can almost just look at the numbers and see how many cases on average they would have at various times. It's always trended about that and
I think that's true. Today, I mean, we had a presentation on the last week, just getting direction on the recreational vehicle as a dwelling unit, and we had Angie Heaveneer and her colleague Dan Smith with code enforcement to talk about the demands that program generates, and she offered some statistics. But each code enforcement specialist has close to 100. There's like, I want to say approximately 160 that haven't been assigned yet. They're triaging inquiries. Just elevate the poignancy of this program. When spring arrives, you start seeing septic system failures, and so we've had several cases where there's a need to address the septic system immediately. The drain fields failed, so I don't think we've ever had more than 5 code enforcement specialists, and I think there's always going to be more demand, more complaints than the code enforcement officers we have. Of course, we're dealing with in our relationship with solid waste. All of the commissioners received some information on a very successful case concerning abatement. Those are going to become, I think, more common as we figure out which ones rise to that level. And credit to my colleague behind me, Stephanie Marshall, for assisting in those efforts. So everything in our county, and you hear it across departments. I'm not saying anything you don't know. It's just more complicated now. Development requires a lot of collaboration, coordination. It's complicated for the uninitiated, and all of our colleagues have to navigate those demands in a way that allows our customers to make informed decisions. And I dare say it's going to get more complicated rather than less, just as more and more residents invest in this region. And Commissioner DeBonne, you just said it. I mean, it's different when you've invested your life savings in the rural county and you have expectations, and you're more aware than maybe you were when we were
the value of the
when we were more rural.
Yeah.
It might be less visible. Now, we're filling in. We continue to be one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing county based on per capita change of counties of our size. So with that comes higher expectations.
So Sherry, you did a great job laying these 3 options out. There's variables in each one of them, and I can see the kind of sandwiching the concept here. I do support this option 2 as a starting point for the budget this year. And it does talk about, the code compliance, public information counter, advanced planning at those 0.09 and 0.87 numbers. But we're gonna add something to these electrical on-site and land use application permits either way. So this one definitely looks like the Goldilocks choice or something.
Well, and again, it's just a starting point for your budget, your budget hearings, whatever option the board chooses. So we're in no way locking the board or the budget committee to this outcome. It just allows for the budget process to continue.
Well, and then when we do have a discussion about how would you subsidize, I remember the concept of advanced planning, you know, if the economy's slowing down, people aren't doing activity, then it's time to really figure out the planning and think of the future. So that, you know, there's ways to pull out the checkbook and say, let's subsidize this or this, you know, different parts. And then, yeah, the on-site system, I don't know if we get into this as much, but you know, Southern Deschutes County and the groundwater protection fund, and there's a lot of things coming out there too, especially that'll be development inside the city, but it's gonna start to create revenue in some areas also.
Yeah, on that last point, a conversation that we'll have on Wednesday about a support for applying for a grant. There's a line item there in the memo where there's opportunities to, we get the grant for a 3-year limited duration position to help with onsite. And I do think that, I'm not here to have the conversation now, but I do think that the demands that are being placed on the onsite wastewater division, especially as it pertains to operation and maintenance, we, as you know, administer and oversee more ATT systems than any other county in Oregon, 1,800 right now, and that goes up a couple hundred every year. And there's a real responsibility to ensure that those that are utilizing ATTs have service contracts in place. There are circumstances, as Commissioner DeBonne and I addressed on Friday, where those contracts lapse. And then just the annual reporting, there's a heightened responsibility to ensure the annual reporting is demonstrating that these ATT systems are functioning. And we've had some challenges with certain service providers, and I think it's going to be a prominent conversation in fiscal year 25 to ensure that this program has the resources and the oversight, because these are huge investments and that carry forward the maintenance that goes along with them. So just planting a seed there, and you know, again, it's a plug for Wednesday's conversation for a potential grant application, but highlighting the ongoing demands that come with ATT systems.
Bill with option number 2, I'd be equally comfortable with option number 1. I don't think it's a difference, but it's not that big of a difference that I can support. I can support option number 1 as well.
Sherry, I'd like to go with option 2, but I'd really like to go with the 18% for electrical and land use, which is, if there's any, you know, that gives them any more, it just seems strange that it's in 3, so I flip it up to that.
Okay, so budget option number 2 with electrical and land use of 18%.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, just because to be consistent.
perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. We appreciate the support and your perspectives and guiding us through this process. So we'll look forward to reconvening in May on this proposal. Thank you.
And Sherry, thank you so much for being here
Thank you.
and your diligence. And Peter, I always think.
Oh, this is all Sherry. This is Sherry. This is not me.
Anyway, thank you, Sherry.
I will blame it on Robert.
At least he didn't, you know, he didn't say anything.
Thank you.
So do we have any other items? Yes,
Was a joint meeting with the city of Redmond,
yes.
and the calendar says 6 o'clock, but Redmond wanted to start earlier, so it's at 5:30. We'll update it. The agenda says 5:30, but just.
Okay, thank you for reminding us, 5:30 in Redmond. then.
Yes. And then the second thing is, on Wednesday's board meeting, there's an agenda item for Reddy's coming in to talk about enterprise zone. And they're scheduled last on the agenda, and Steve Curley asked if they could be moved up because they have to help get ready for this flag function.
Okay, sure.
And I'll remind you, Chair.
So we're gonna, how early should we move them up to? What looks best?
Well, there's the child abuse prevention proclamation at 9:15 or 9:10, so maybe after that.
Okay, right. Please remind me.
I will, thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, Wednesday, I'll be speaking for a few moments as a board member of SLED and Southern Deschutes County resident. But I'll also open up by saying, you know, what, on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, and just a few simple statements, so. That's the plan for me. I do have a couple slides, but it's really South County very specific topics. I know, so here's another item. I know we did a public health emergency declaration about fentanyl, and it's been a 90-day period. And I'm just interested in an update. Take a few moments and you put it on the agenda and really look at, okay, what have we done? I know there's reporting that the health department's doing, and you know, what do we know? As the weather changes, probably some activities are gonna change around. So just kind of a follow-up to our emergency.
Well, the good news is, Doug Riggs, not think that measure was gonna be changed and things were gonna be recriminalized, and they were. So
Yeah.
whatever that did to help all that pressure. And I
So-
think I heard on the news that I think it was in Crook County, had 4 overdoses last week and 2 of them deaths. It was something on local news this morning, and I didn't quite catch the story, but I don't believe it was Deschutes County, but it was, you know, it's what's still happening out there.
But yeah, maybe a work session like this, a Monday afternoon, just to kind of compare notes about what we know. Are we notifying the right people? Are we getting information flowing? Could there be resources somewhere to help?
I think we really need to do more for the students because of the 6 young people in Crook County that have psychotic disorder from marijuana use. I believe that we're going to have a presentation in May from one of our doctors, because that parents need to know how dangerous marijuana use is in today's world. And if Crook County, with a population of what, 28,000, has 6 young people with that issue, where who knows if they're gonna be able to ever come back from that situation. So, yeah, that's great. And maybe even House Bill 4002, we should have something updated on
Yeah,
that.
so there's all kinds of things we could, so,
Yeah.
yeah, that was the idea, kind of an agenda item just to follow up during this emergency declaration period.
Great.
And a House Bill 4002 implementation update, I think is worth spending some time on. I know, kind of trying to understand the impact of your symbolic emergency declaration. I don't necessarily think we need to use more time for that, but you know, I would appreciate looking at getting a comprehensive look at what we're doing to implement House Bill 4002.
And I've already suggested, our next LIPSC meeting, Public Safety Coordinating Council. I've already suggested that to Judge, Ashby and to DB, that we schedule that for the May meeting. So that gives us the month of May to really get the ground running, hopefully with figuring out what implementation looks like. So that would be one opportunity. Maybe we do it the Monday before or the Wednesday after that LIPSC meeting in May, or unless you'd like to have it early.
No, I just an idea, I didn't want to slip by. Any time's fine.
And Dave Doyle's, Andrew Doyle, who made the trip to Salem for House Bill 4002, said to me that actually it was only going to probably affect 50 to 100 people in Deschutes County because of the numbers. So I was a bit surprised that that's a few people, but he is the expert in the field.
Another item, next week, there's a FEMA Region 10 Emergency Communications Working Group meeting. So this is Oregon and Washington and Idaho. And this is down the path of the State Interoperability Executive Council that I'm on, representing AOC on. So why I'm bringing it up here today is, it looks like there's no reimbursement, but I'm gonna go to a Thursday morning meeting, so I'd like to spend the night before there and drive down. So that means Deschutes County would be, I'm asking for Deschutes County support in, reimbursing my trip. So, it's not AOC, it's something else I'm doing at a state level, and I just want to communicate with my fellow commissioners before I do this. Hotel room and mileage to Salem next Thursday.
Oh, so you're gonna drive west then? said you were gonna drive down, and I'm thinking like, oh, we're going to California for the meeting, I don't know what.
Down in elevation, but as I say, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
making sure we're on the same page, it's kind of, it's statewide committee work that I'm involved in, but as I say, I don't think there's any other reimbursements we're getting down there. And I've learned that, don't try to get to a 9 o'clock meeting by getting up at 3:30 in La Pine and driving and then coming home that day. So it's prudent to spend the night before, so you're bright the next morning.
So do we need a motion on that?
We ever, I mean, to, like, I appreciate your sharing with your fellow commissioners, but I think if you set out a travel budget for Richards County admin for the year, and you deem that there's some things that are important for you to go to, then I think that's your decision.
Well, that's fine.
I don't feel like I
That's
need
good.
to, I don't feel like I need to weigh in on that at all.
No, and I've said my piece here, so that's not a problem.
Well, I just want to thank Nick, because I used to cover the difference between the stay per diem in Salem, because it doesn't have its own per diem, so you get stuck with something like way down here, and I would cover that difference. The first 2 years, I think I was a commissioner. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't understand why Salem doesn't have its own per diem. It's,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
just getting a hotel room for like 110 or 120 or something.
plus tax.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just putting that amount, I'm not looking at it that differently.
No, I mean, but that's what it, if you followed, it's Salem needs its own per diem and, yeah. And hopefully someday we'll get that done. It is the state capital. You would think they would have their own per diem rate.
Okay, well, I'll be traveling next Thursday, that's.
Good, okay, great. So any other items?
Share that on Thursday. And wildfire hazard map rulemaking advisory committee meeting. We spent half a day talking primarily about how the mapping effort was going to address irrigated lands. A major upshot of that was there was a whole lot of agreement that irrigating lands both mitigates fire risks during the period of irrigation and also can have, literally change the vegetation permanently or, very long term. With specific kinds of fire or fuels implications. There were a number of irrigation interests who, well, I wouldn't say they were irrigation interests. There were some advocates from the agricultural community who tried to say, but the sticky point was how many of the recent years do you need to have been irrigating for there to actually have been, mitigating or positive long-term impacts on vegetation from a fire perspective. And there were a number of people who were advocating if someone has irrigated 1 out of 5 years, they should, that provides a huge benefit in terms of wildfire behavior and field behavior. I didn't think that was particularly accurate. So that'll be an ongoing discussion in that rulemaking advisory committee in the next couple of meetings.
All right, well, I would say that the irrigated pastures by me either have a couple hundred deer or elk running on them, and or a lot of people run their cattle on their irrigated pastures off season in order to, so they don't have to feed them hay that part of the year. It saves on that funding. So that's what I drive by every day. On Friday afternoon, I did go to the Vietnam Veterans rededication of their facility at the cemetery. Yeah, it was, I think they said they had like 17 contractors that helped pay for a lot of the costs, and they only had to cover like 17,000. It was really quite takes your breath away because we had 58,000 Americans that died in Vietnam. And to have them remembered, I think it's incredibly important. So it was wonderful that the project got done on a timely basis on the day we were remembering the Vietnam veterans. And it was a lot nicer than Thursday's ceremony that I didn't go to, that wind was blowing like 80 miles an hour there. So, yeah, Dickie, they said it was really blowing.
I think there was gonna be a flyover too. I wonder if it even happened.
No, I think they had the flyover, but the weather was, yeah, all the dirt came from the Cooley project. Yes. So it was all blowing out that way. Okay, may we now have a statement read from Kim Riley, our legal?
The Deschutes County Board of Commissioners will now convene in an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.660 2I, which allows the board to meet in executive session in order to review and evaluate employee performance. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report to that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting in executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made in executive session. And at the conclusion of the executive session, we will open the doors and invite the audience back to the meeting.
Thank you.
There might be some tweak to that. Are we live stream or Zoom? Because we'll need to reactivate that. Sure.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.